What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Gunfish TV. As you can see, I'm out here on the water today. Been doing a little bit of fishing, but on today's video, we are going to talk about fishing line. A lot of you all comment on my videos, message me, just asking me what types of fishing line do I use for what techniques. And I just want to get into that on a brief video for you all and just talk about, fishing line in general, whether I use fluorocarbon, to some type of hybrid fishing line, copolymer, monofilament. Fishing line can get a little bit, let's say, overwhelming if you don't know exactly what to use it for, but I'm going to try to simplify things for you all in this video. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is flipping and pitching. So for my flipping and pitching techniques, I use 20-pound test fluorocarbon. So this particular line on this reel and on all my jig reels and my flipping reel is 20-pound test 100% P-line fluorocarbon. So I use fluorocarbon on these mainly for the abrasion resistance and just for the overall strength, and fluorocarbon does not have a lot of stretch in it. So it's more sensitive, it's denser than monofilament or copolymer. Your baits sink a little bit faster. That's not really why I use it per se, but just the density of the line, it helps transmit vibrations and feelings of the bottom to your rod a little bit better. Not to mention, like I said, the abrasion resistance, so it doesn't get torn all up when you're flipping around, concrete, rocks, or, slabs or wood or whatever you're throwing around, because we know under the water there's all kinds of stuff. So you don't want to hang the bass of a lifetime and you end up losing it because you don't have the right kind of line. So for my flipping and pitching setups and for my jig setups, 20-pound test P-line fluorocarbon, 100% fluorocarbon. That's what I use on those. So we're going to get into, and this is another jig technique, and you all know that I love this, and that is skipping a jig on docks. Absolutely stellar technique when you have a lake with a ton of docks, in the springtime or in the fall, they get on them. It's a ton of fun. But for my skipping rod and reel, my bait caster, 20-pound test P-line fluoro clear. So this is not fluorocarbon, this is fluoro clear. There's a difference. Fluoro clear is a hybrid line. It is a copolymer with a fluorocarbon coating. So what you get is you get that manageability of copolymer, because copolymer tends to be more supple and handles a little bit easier than fluorocarbon, which tends to be a little bit stiffer. But you kind of get the best of both worlds with this fluoro clear. You have a manageable copolymer, center, and then you have fluorocarbon on the outside for that abrasion resistance. So if you're throwing under docks, you're ripping the fish out, you're bringing it over dock posts, all kinds of stuff, your line can handle, that kind of, bolts and logs or whatever. It can handle it because it has that fluorocarbon coating. It can take those rough dock posts and different things that are under docks or whatever. So fluoro clear is a very good line because it's supple, it casts very easy, it's great for skipping, and I like it for my skipping setup on 20-pound test, the P-line fluoro clear. So that's what I use on my skipping rod and reels. As I said, my pitching reel, that I flip my rage bug on and all that stuff, 20-pound test fluorocarbon is what I use on that. So now we're going to get into more of the moving baits. Now for all my moving baits, I use copolymer, P-line C21 copolymer. Been using this line for years and years and years. It is excellent fishing line. I guarantee it. Casts very good, very manageable. Doesn't get really kinky and just ball up on the spool. It is really good line. Very supple. And so you might be wondering, what's the difference between copolymer and monofilament, or what's the main differences? Well, copolymer has less stretch than mono, but more stretch than fluorocarbon. So, you kind of get with copolymer, It's a little bit, sometimes tends to be a little bit, you know, I don't want to say harder. The line is a little bit harder. That's not really the right word that I'm looking for, but it's somewhat stiffer and it's more abrasion resistant than standard monofilament. You know, so I like the fact that you can use copolymer and you kind of get the best of both worlds. So you get some qualities of fluorocarbon and you get some qualities of monofilament. So the qualities of monofilament would be the softness and the suppleness, and then the qualities of fluorocarbon would be more abrasion resistant. So I use copolymer for all of my moving baits, including my top waters, but I'm gonna get into what pound test I use for each technique. So on my jerkbait rod, I alternate between 10 and 12 pound test. It totally depends on where I'm at. If I'm on a deep clear lake, I like to throw 10 pound test. If I'm throwing it in the river or maybe a lake that has more wood, I'm gonna go with 12 pound test, which is on here right now. So I like to go with 12 pound test or 10 pound test C21 copolymer for my jerkbait setup. All right, so we just had a duck hunter come by, so I had to stop briefly, but we're gonna get back into it right now. So, talking about crankbaits. For my crankbait rod and reel, I like to use different pound tests depending on the situation. So, kind of like the jerkbait. If I'm fishing deep, clear water and I'm throwing a crankbait and I want to get to max depth, I like to put on 10 pound test. If I'm fishing in the river, a lot of times I throw 15 pound test C21. Right now I have 15 pound test on here. I'm out on the river fishing, tons of logs, sticks, laydowns, and all that stuff. I'm dragging this through there. I want to have that heavier pound test, so if I get a big fish, I can get that fish up and out of the cover and, you know, get him in the boat. So crankbait, either 10 or 15, depends on where I'm at. Spinnerbait, I throw 15 no matter where I'm at. 15 pound test copolymer on a spinnerbait. I always throw 15 pound test. That never varies. That never varies. 15 pound test to me is heavy enough. If I'm throwing about around logs or laydowns or whatever, I can get them out of there. And let's face it, if it's clear water, that spinnerbait's moving pretty doggone fast, so they'll chase it down. They'll chase it down and eat it. So top water, I don't have the rods on the deck right now because it's cold, but for my poppers, and if I'm throwing like a Bangalore or a Devil's Horse or something like that, some kind of top water, a smaller top water, I throw 15 pound test copolymer, C21. That's what I throw on that. If I'm throwing a buzz bait, I always throw 50 pound test braid. Always, always throw 50 pound test braid. The same with my frog, 50 pound test braid all the time. I never vary from that. It's always 50 pound test braid. You know, the only thing that I jump back and forth on braid sometimes is Alabama rig. If I'm throwing somewhere where it's a little bit muddier water, I will throw 50 pound braid. If I'm somewhere that's super, super clear, I'll throw 20 pound test fluorocarbon. It just depends on the situation when it comes down to that. You know, there's other techniques that I'm sure that I've missed, but I can tell you that if I didn't talk about it, I'm probably throwing 15 pound test copolymer on it, C21. So basically, broken down as simple as I can get it, 20 pound test on all my flipping and jig stuff. 20 pound test fluorocarbon or fluor clear if I'm skipping. And then, like I said, jerkbait, I alternate between 10 and 12. Crankbait, I alternate between 10 and 15. Pretty much everything else, 15 pound test. All right, so let's get in. That was all my bait cast setups. So let's get into my spinning setups. And this is very, very simple, the way I do my spinning setups. So this one right here and all my others, no matter what technique, 20 pound test P-line Spin X braid is what I have on every single spinning reel, other than like an ultralight. But every bass spinning reel, 20 pound test P-line Spin X braid is what I throw on it. So let's talk about leaders. So you're probably like, well, what leaders do you throw? That completely depends on the technique. So if I'm throwing a drop shot, I like 10 pound test Most of the time I use Fluor Clear. So that's copolymer with that fluorocarbon outer shell on it. So I like to do 10-pound test when I'm throwing a drop shot. If I'm throwing a shaky head, I like to throw 12-pound test on a shaky head. If I'm skipping docks, or like on this one, I'm throwing I had a paddle tail. I can't pick it up because it done got hung in my crankbait, but had a paddle tail on it. I was throwing a 15-pound test C21 leader because I was on a lake that had super, super dingy water and I was catching some pretty big fish. So I wanted to make sure that I had a leader that could withstand a pretty big fish without just having to let it run forever. So something else, sometimes I will go up to a 20-pound test fluorocarbon leader on a spinning reel if I'm skipping docks with a Senko. Because like I said, you get under those docks and you got dock bolts, you got all kinds of stuff that can tear your line up. And if you're throwing something small, they can get you under there, you get a big fish and you're gonna be in for a world of hurt because you cannot get him out. So I will upgrade to 20-pound test if I'm skipping a Senko on docks. My ultralight rod and reel, I have 4-pound test, just monofilament on that, nothing crazy. And you know, not really going to get into the small panfish stuff. I just really wanted to get in to talking about, you know, what I used on my bass stuff. You all have been asking me, and I just wanted to do a quick video going over, you know, what line for what techniques. So I'm also going to do soon a rod and reel, you know, arsenal video, just go over my rod and reels and what rod and reel actions and all I use for certain techniques. And I'm also going to do a skipping video very soon, a skipping tutorial to show you all how to become better at skipping, what rod, reel, line, jigs, and all of that. So be looking out for that. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss out on it. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you next time on Gunfish TV.